Hey everyone, welcome to HBCU Game Day. We're talking the business side of sports today, and whenever you hear the word business and sports, same sentence, you know Dr. Cavil is right behind it, and whoop, there he is, all the way from H-Town. Doc, it's 2 weeks in a row, man. We are kind of making this a thing. Congratulations on a great weekend at the Black College World Series. I know everybody had a great time there. More news shuffling in on a Tuesday. We have news that the ASUN and the WAC have formed a collaboration. They're going to operate as two separate conferences the way they conduct their business, but that automatic qualifier for the FCS playoffs is going to be decided between those two as a collective unit. So at a time to be determined later, they're going to give us the final details about how they'll determine between the WAC champion and the ASUN champion who gets that one automatic qualifier. But it was a smart, strategic, and necessary move on their part, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you broke it down wonderfully. It's pretty good as you get into this little business of sport. You catching up really good in these de facto lectures, as we like to call them here. Before I move forward on that, as you said, shout out to Edward Waters University in the Tyson Food Black College World Series, and therefore the HBCU Black College National Championship. So shout out to them. But back to the business of sports. This is a fascinating framework in terms of a collaboration because it's done very uniquely, unlike what we saw 2 years ago, 2021, basically, when you had the collaboration between the ASUN and the WAC, where they came out front and they had both schools just have essentially one honors that they would do in terms of recognizing players and teams and awards. This time, they're coming together for the collaboration, but it's only to make sure that this qualifies them under the NCAA rules that says that you must have 6 teams to have a AQ. And so both teams are at 5 that are Division I certified. And that is because people probably remember that Sam Houston State, previously of the WAC, moved to Conference USA. Jacksonville State, previously of the ASUN, also joining Conference USA, which means they are ineligible for the FCS playoffs, which means now the conference does not meet that minimum standard. Well, some people will quickly say, well, wait a minute. I thought there were several teams in the WAC. They were up like 7 teams. That is correct, because you're probably thinking about Tarleton, right? Tarleton State, as well, Dixie State, as it was formerly known. They've renamed themselves Utah Tech, but they're in the transition framework of Division II, and they're in their 3rd-year cycle. So that means they don't qualify for Division I, nor does that allow the league to qualify. So to circle back and just make it clear for everybody, they are coming together to make sure that at least one of the 10 teams will be guaranteed a automatic qualifying bid to the FCS playoffs.
And so people might be wondering, well, why are you guys talking about this on HBCU Game Day? This doesn't have anything to do with HBCUs. But in the larger picture, there's a conversation to be had. We've seen the same type of collaboration, the OVC and the Big South, because of the shifts and the movement that we've had over the last year or so in FCS football. So my question to kind of bring it back home for HBCUs, in your opinion, and this would be your opinion, what is the value proposition in this automatic qualifier? Because we see it is very important, but not every conference views that AQ with the same level of value. The SWAC obviously looks at it totally different. And they're in a different scenario with the amount of money that they can make in games outside of the NCAA playoffs. So when you look at the FCS landscape, what do you think the thinking was here in terms of value proposition?
Important contextual question. And for the FCS, there's essentially 3 different propositions. One is for those FCS programs that are seeking to participate in the FCS playoffs. A lot of ways, they really don't have an option out outside of that. When you talk about the SWAC, MEAC is, well, where they actually send their automatic qualifier, meaning their champion team, right, to the Celebration Bowl to participate. And so they have a place for those teams to go. At this point, if you're one of the other FCS conference and you don't get the automatic bid for the playoffs, there's a chance that you'll have a team that wins your conference that doesn't have anywhere to go. Well, people will say, well, wait a minute, you have the Ivy League, which is the third one, who essentially crowned their regular season champion, and they're good with that. So there's essentially three options. And so really it's important for people to contextually understand that there is a major difference at the FCS level of what is important to conferences. And a lot of it is based on what are the goals that your conference is seeking to have. And you see with the MEAC and SWAC, that is for their champions to participate in the Celebration Bowl. And we know financially there's some windfall for making that decision. You have the Ivy League, which essentially has all the money that most of us could ever wish for. And so for them, academically, they said that they're going to end their season essentially at the end of the final exam period. And they didn't want to push their athletes for postseason. And then there was no need for it, and conference championships was enough. And then you have these other conferences that said, well, we would like postseason participation, and we're going to participate in the NCFCS playoffs or tournament.
Now, Doc, the same amount of teams will be in the pool for the NCAA tournament with these two, or the FCS playoffs, I mean to say. With these two conferences formerly having two AQs and now that coming down to one, that opens up another at-large spot there in the FCS playoffs. Does that change the perception of the value of having a spot there for anyone, do you think? Or is it just, hey, just one more at-large team is going to get in?
I think it's basically one more at-large team that's going to get in. There will be some that may argue that there's additional value for it. Essentially, there's a rule on the books previously for the NCAA. If you have a field of teams, half of the field must be at-large bids. So as you get automatic qualifiers, that's where you had some discussion that there may be talk about expanding the playoffs. Right now it's at 24. They decided to give some teams, top teams, a bye, and the rest of them play in that week 1, week 0, depending on how you want to look at it, right? And so then you have the rest with automatic bids. Well, with essentially one of those at-large bids coming off the table because they're not meeting the minimum threshold, that's where you're starting to get these collaborations. Well, the same thing is similar for the Big South OVC. There were some questions about whether teams were leaving, where would that leave teams 5 and 6? So they went ahead and did the partnership, collaboration. And so it's all about how many teams you have and make sure you're protecting that automatic bid. Because you would imagine you're a commissioner of a league and you come to your presidents and chancellors and saying after the end of the season, we don't have anything to play for, whether it's a bowl, i.e. Celebration Bowl, or FCS playoffs, NCS playoffs tournament. That's not going to be a good look for the conference commissioner. So in this case, they're saying it's better for us to pull ourselves together, at least make sure there's an automatic. In a lot of cases, if the teams are strong enough, if you look at the WAC, ASUN, they're thinking they'll probably have multiple teams, but they want to protect it. You have Big South with teams going down, some of the best teams leaving. Oddly enough, in many ways, they left the Big South to come over to the ASUN. So there may be some question in terms of just how deep the Big South is. Some people may have that same type of question about the OVC. What is the depth of that conference? And depending on what type of records they have, without the automatic bid, would they actually have a team that would qualify at large? Do you want to take that risk? That's not the case. And in some ways, that's where it gets interesting when you start thinking about the MEAC and how they may fit into all this equation.
Yeah, so looking at the MEAC, HBCU Game Day has reported that Howard this summer has plans on leaving the MEAC, following in the footsteps of Hampton, North Carolina A&T. Now, they have not officially left. It's just been reported that will happen in the future. But let's say, for argument's sake, that the MEAC does get down to 5. schools, football playing institutions. They've got to do something. And you would think there has to be something proactive, because you just can't sit around and hope nobody else leaves when you see what the trend is in FCS football right now, and at the FCS level. Would you recommend this collaboration mode as opposed to trying to get somebody to join the conference? Does this make sense? Is it the new hybrid move? Is it the cryptocurrency of FCS football right now?
Cryptocurrency. I must add this in. We did get the chance to have the Commissioner Sonia Steele's on our show, and she's put out a statement, and the presidents came out saying that they were staying together. So we will put that out there. But let's go with the question at hand, because I think contextually it's important, but it's going to be a little different than maybe what people think. I think it's always good for collaboration and partnership, but it's going to be for a different reason. For the MEAC, essentially, as long as they have 3 teams, by definition, they could have a round robin and they could declare a champion, and that champion can play in the celebration mode. So from that perspective, there's not the same type of NCAA threshold need to be at a minimum of 6. So losing a team, if that happened, from that perspective, is not, an end all be all. But realistically, becomes a lot more challenging just from a scheduling standpoint. When you get down to 6, 7, 6, or 5 teams, I should say, scheduling can get a little more challenging in terms of what that looks like. So that's one reason that you may consider a partnership more than anything, even outside of the AQ. So it can be done for different reasons. There is also the advantage of collaboration to show that your conference is just as strong as others, which makes you more marketable in regards to recruiting additional teams that will come in. One of the challenges that most of these conferences are having, whether it's the MEAC, ASUN, the WAC, is the fact you see some of these Division IIs that have already made the decision, as we talked about Tarleton State transitioning a couple of years ago. Bellamar, you saw what happened with the ASUN, as they won the automatic bid and couldn't get the bid to the tournament, and how that can really throw a loophole in things if you're not careful. So the balance of all of this becomes important, but Division II, with the transformation committee, they're talking about changing the requirements for being a Division I institution. So a lot of the current Division II institutions across the board are taking a wait and see approach about what are these rules going to be before they ultimately put their toe in the water, if you allow me to use that framework, to make a declaration of moving from Division II to Division I. So that's why you see it across the board, and the MEAC is being affected by that. And so that's some of the nuance from a pure business perspective of why it would be important to create the partnership and why it's a challenge at the same time about how you look at that. So that's a really important question for us to really take a deep dive and understand the landscape of the NCAA in general, and more specifically at the FCS, and obviously in regards to how does that affect HBCU programs such as the MEAC. Now, we're talking football here, but the MEAC doesn't put any emphasis, they don't have they forego the AQ for the Celebration Bowl, so they don't automatically send their champion to the playoffs, but they do every so often get an at-large bid. Do they have to consider, and again, we're operating in the hypothetical here with that magic number of 6, do they also have to consider the ramifications for basketball and other sports when they start thinking about these numbers, or does football just rule things across the board? I'm so glad you asked that question, because that's extremely important. And no, it's just not about football, although that's what we usually focus on. What's really out there is baseball. For the MEAC, which only has 4 teams, which again is below that threshold of 6. So this is the last year where they have a 2-year waiver to being under 6 to get to 6 before they will lose that AQ for the baseball tournament, College World Series. So there's a chance that they might have to put those baseball programs in another conference until they're able to maybe get some of these Division II teams after this transformation committee makes a declaration to move in and join the conference for all sports. There's also a unique component out there for basketball, where there are a lot of different steps to the rules, which I'm not sure that we can really go through in detail enough without confusing everybody totally. But essentially, there's a minimum of number of teams that you have to have for basketball. There's a number of team sports that you have to have. And when we define team sports, that would be obviously football, basketball, baseball. There are a couple of others out there, soccer, in terms of a team sport, versus individual sports, which would be like tennis, track and field. So you have to have a minimum number of team sports for a conference to qualify also for the basketball tournament, not just the minimum 6. So it gets very detailed in regards to NCAA requirements of what you require to have AQ, but specifically AQ for basketball. And as you know, there is direct money tied for going to the NCAA basketball tournament. And that's where it gets a little concerning in terms of making the moves. And that's the business side of this that we are all really keeping our eyes on. And so while there's not a major concern in terms of them not being at the minimum number of 6, there is a concern in terms of the total number of sports that the conference offers that allows them to qualify or continue to qualify for AQ to not just an individual tournament, but specifically the basketball tournament.
Because the one bag you do not want to fumble in college sports is the NCAA tournament payout bag, right?
That's absolutely. To give people some framework of that, the monetary value of a unit is what they provide is $2.some million a year. And that is over a 6-year period that you get that. And every year that 6-year period starts over. And it's increasing over the life of this contract that goes up to 2036. And so that is extremely financial money that you want to get into the basketball. In fact, basketball on the men's side, not even women, is the only tournament that you are able to get units associated with financial reward. All the other tournaments, essentially basketball pays for the NCAA to be able to do all these other tournaments. In a lot of ways, that's why you have to pay for play, even in the FCS level where you pay for, if you're hosting a team, you got to put a bid in. So that's where a lot of that comes from, because there's really not any money associated directly coming from the NCAA to participate in these other tournaments, only in basketball, which is one reason why you could see why the SWAC and the MEAC, when the opportunity came for them to get to the Celebration Bowl, which is more what you see at the FBS level, where you participate in the bowl and you get revenue associated with it. And we know that you get over $1 million now to participate for both conferences to participate in the Celebration Bowl. So that's significant revenue for a conference to consider, specifically at the FCS level.
As we see more of these partnerships and the AQs switching around and people kind of collaborating, do you see, because this year we saw when the SWAC, FAMU was almost good enough, but not quite, because they lost to Jackson State in the Orange Blossom Classic, but they made it to the FCS playoffs. Do you see even more of an opportunity for second, third best teams in the SWAC to maybe get into that FCS playoffs if they don't make it to the Celebration Bowl?
Absolutely. I think the more at-large bids is more beneficial to the SWAC and the MEAC. Certainly the SWAC with the number of teams you would think are participating. And obviously your non-conference schedule to throw the MEAC back in there gets a lot of weight. So if you do not come out the champion and your schedule falls right, that you're not waiting to see if you're going to participate in the SWAC championship game, yes, certainly the at-large component of that becomes very important. And the more at-large bids, the more opportunities you have if you're in the SWAC or the MEAC for that matter, in any conference, to earn one of those at-large bids. So yes, that becomes significant when you start talking about the partnership between ASUN and the WAC, between the OVC and the Big South, because now they're allowing more at-large bids, I should say, to be up for grabs, and that's when it becomes important for members of the SWAC.
Do you see these moves as smart moves? Did you look at them and say, oh, I like that? When it came to having to make a decision to keep yourself in the game, these these not quite joining together, but collaborating on the football side?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. And it goes back to the finances, but it's more the finances on the basketball that we talked about earlier versus in terms of football. So I love the partnership and the making sure you have an at-large bid. But in a lot of ways, I think when you talk about the strength of what most people see, the ASUN and the WAC, they were going to have a team that finishes at the top, pretty much be guaranteed an at-large bid. But what this collaboration does, it makes sure that these two conferences are able to stay separate, which means they can earn that automatic bid to the basketball tournament, which you know the revenue associated with it. So I think it's important from that concept because it gives them more time to make sure they can go back into the pool of either getting a current FCS program to come over, which is the easiest, but probably the most challenging to actually get teams to move from where they are, or get a Division II program to move up to the Division I FCS level. And that's what they're seeking. They're seeking more time to balance up, to recalibrate their conferences, whether you're talking about the Southland, the WAC, the ASUN, the OVC, and the Big South, and the MEAC for that matter. That time is extremely important because it's really the basketball money that they don't want to lose a hold of, which all of them are pretty safe because they have 8 to 10 teams in basketball because some of them are basketball-only programs without a football team.
Gotcha. So the football collaboration ensures that you still get 2 basketball checks. You don't have to share
got
that.
It. One for each conference. That's correct.
See, Doc, I don't connect those dots. I don't follow it that far down the line, which is why I love talking to you, man, because you all make it make sense, and you understand the thinking of other intelligent people who are thinking, how do we keep it? Always comes back to the money, right?
That's it. Chase the money. Chase the money. And oftentimes we get so excited because we thought football is the king, and football is the king in terms of interest. But it's not necessarily the financial windfall that you tend to think about in the FBS or even for the SWAC because of the large following and crowds in regards to what they're able to do with some of these classic events. Now, there's some questions in regards to how much money is associated with that. But still above and beyond, even though those numbers may be low in terms of what you believe HBCU programs should be earning, it's bigger than what they would get outside of compared to these other FCS programs that are only be held to their home attendance and whatever sponsorships they can get directly for the conference associated with football or directly to the institution. So that basketball money becomes extremely important.
Yeah, there's a reason why those games are on TBS, TNT, while we watch True TV once a year. Where's True TV? There it is. Yeah, every one of those clicks is a cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. So that's how it unfolds. Well, Dr. Cavil, he's from inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you check them out on social media, on Facebook, on YouTube. Always good information, entertaining information, infotainment every week with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dr. Cavil, we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy that Houston weather. Hadn't got too muggy down there yet. The humidity hasn't kicked in yet, has it?
No, it's starting to warm up, but the humidity hasn't come in yet. We're still getting breeze, but we're scared because we know it's coming.
Yeah, on the way. Just keep it out of Atlanta. Just keep it all there at Houston, man. All right, he's Dr. Cavil. I'm Tyler Carr. You're watching HBCU Game Day.